Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today we are going to study about the footprints without feet. Okay, the chapter 5 of supplementary reader class 10th, footprints without feet. So let's get started. The two boys started in surprise at the fresh muddy imprints of a pair of bare feet. What was a barefooted man doing on the steps of a house in the middle of the London, and where was the man? As they gazed, a remarkable sight met their eyes. A fresh footmark appeared from nowhere. Further, footprints followed, one after another, descending the steps and progressing down the street. The boys followed, fascinated, until the muddy impressions became fainter and fainter and at last disappeared altogether. Now, the meaning of these three paragraphs is that the two boys started to notice the fresh muddy imprints of a man of a means of bare feet, a pair of bare feet, but they were not able to see any man there. Okay, and they followed the one after another, descending the steps and progressing down the street. The boys were confused to see the muddy imprints, but no, not a man. And the muddy impressions were becoming dull and dull altogether. Now, the explanation of the mystery was really simple enough. The bewildered boys means the confused boys had been following a scientist who had just discovered how to make the human body transparent. Okay, so there is a scientist. From this line we get to know that there is a scientist who has discovered how to make himself invisible, and explanation of the mysteries itself. So, Griffin, the scientist, had carried out experiment after experiment to prove that human body could become invisible. Finally, he swallowed certain rare drugs, and his body became as transparent as a sheet of glass, though it also remained as solid as glass. So, the explanation of the scientist, his hard work is that he carried out experiment after experiment. Okay, this is his hard work, and to prove that human body could become invisible, finally he swallowed certain rare drugs and his body became transparent. Now, the brilliant scientist. Okay, why they have used brilliant scientist? Because he is actually a brilliant scientist. Though Griffin was rather a lawless person. He was also a lawless person. His landlord disliked him and tried to eject him. In revenge, Griffin set fire to the house. Means the house does not belong to him. Okay, but still he set fire to the house. This means that he is lawless. To get away without being seen, he had to remove his clothes so that he would become transparent as glass. Now, thus it was that he became a homeless wanderer. Um, Usually, the question arrives that when did Griffin become a homeless wanderer? Okay, so then the answer will be this only. Thus, it became a homeless wanderer without clothes, without money, and quite invisible until he happened to step in some mud and left footprints as he walked. Now he escaped easily enough from the boys who followed his footprints in London, but his adventures were by no means over. Means his adventures were not at all over. He had chosen a bad time of the year to wander about London because it was midwinter. Okay, and the air was bitterly cold, and he could not do without clothes. Now he had no clothes, no money, so how will he save himself from the cold? Instead of walking about the streets, he decided to slip into a big London store for warmth. Okay, closing time arrived, and as soon as the doors were shut, Griffin was able to give himself the pleasure of clothing and feeding himself without regard to expense. Means he would not have to give the expenditure for his, like clothes or any food he will eat in the store. Okay, now he broke open boxes and wrappers and fitted himself out with warm clothes. Soon, with shoes, an overcoat, and a wide brimmed hat, he became fully dressed. okay, and visible person. In the kitchen of the restaurant, he found cold meat, coffee, and he followed up the meal with sweets and wine taken from the grocery store. Finally, he settled down to sleep on a pile of quilts. Now, what are quilts? Quilts are blankets. Okay. So, with all his what he could do now, he did all, like from food to clothes. He was fully dressed and then slept on the quilt, on the pile of quilts. If only Griffin had managed to wake up in the morning early, okay, early morning in good time, all might have been well. But he did not wake up until the assistants were already arriving next morning. When he saw a couple of them approaching, he panicked and began to run. They naturally gave chase. In the end, he was able to escape only by quickly taking off his newly found clothes. Now, once again, in the when the air was bitterly cold, he had to remove his newly found clothes. So once more, he would found himself invisible but naked in the chill January air. This time, he decided to try the stock of a theatrical company in the hope of finding not only clothes but also something that would hide the empty space above his shoulders, so that he would become a visible man, okay, not a headless man. Shivering with cold, he hurried to Drury Lane, the center of the theater world. He soon found a suitable shops apt shop for him, and he made his way invisible upstairs and came out a little later wearing bandages round his forehead, dark glasses, false nose, big bushy side whiskers, and a large hat, and the fully dressed visible person. To escape without being seen, he casually attacked the shopkeeper from behind, after which he robbed him all the money he could find. Okay, now to escape without being seen, now he attacked the shopkeeper and robbed all his money. Now, eager to get away from the crowded London, he took a train to the village of Iping, where he booked 2 rooms at the local inn. The arrival of a stranger at the inn in winter was in any case an unusual event. Means the arrival of a stranger. Okay, the as Griffin was a stranger for the people living in winter also. Right. In spite of winter, the arrival of stranger in was an unusual event. A stranger of such uncommon appearance set all tongues wagging. Means everyone who saw the scientist, saw the person, saw the stranger, was making their own commitments, or they were passing comments. Okay, Mrs. Hall, the landlord's wife, okay, made every effort to be friendly, but Griffin had no desire to talk, and he told her that my reason for coming to Iping is a desire for solitude. Solitude, okay, solitude means loneliness. Okay, then I do not wish to be disturbed in my work. Besides, an accident has affected my face. Okay, satisfied that her guest was an eccentric scientist, and in a view of the fact that he had paid her in advance. Because only he had paid her in advance, Mrs. Hall was not able to say anything or to comment on the scientist appearance. Okay, eccentric means unusual scientist. Okay, now Mrs. Hall was prepared to excuse his strange habits and irritable temper, but the stolen money did not last long, and presently Griffin had to admit that he had no more ready cash. He pretended, however, he was expecting a check to arrive at any moment. Now he had no money. Also, he had no own. No, not was he was not an owner, and no money, no house or something he could sell and buy. Okay, so he now shortly afterwards a curious episode occurred. Very early in the morning, a clergyman and his wife were awakened by noises in the study. Creeping downstairs, They heard the chink of money being taken from the clergyman's desk. Now, without making any noise, without a poker grasped firmly in his hand, the clergyman flung open the door. Surrender. But there was no one. Then, to his amazement, he realized that the room appeared to be empty. He and his wife looked under the desk, behind the curtains, even up the chimney, but there was not a single sign of anybody. Yet the desk had been opened and the housekeeping money was missing. Extraordinary affair. The clergyman kept saying for the rest of the day. Extraordinary affair. But it was not as extraordinary as the behavior of Mrs. Hall Furniture a little later that morning. The landlord and his wife were up very early and were surprised to see that scientist's door wide open. Usually it was shut and locked, so they were very furious if anyone entered. Usually Griffin was very furious if anyone entered his room. Therefore, he usually shut and locked his door. But the opportunity seemed too good to be missed for Mrs. Hall. So, landlord and his wife peeped round the door, saw nobody, and decided to investigate. The bedclothes were cold, showing that scientists must have been up for some time. And stranger still, the clothes and the bandages that he always wore were lying about the room. All of a sudden, Mrs. Hall heard a sniff close to her ear. A moment later, the hat on the bedpost leapt up and dashed itself into her face. Then the bedroom chair became alive, springing into the air. It charged straight at Mrs. Hall as she and her husband turned away in the terror. The extraordinary chair pushed them both out of the room, and they then appeared as and to slam appeared to slam and lock the door after them. Mrs. Hall almost fell down the stairs in hysterics. She was convinced that the room was haunted by spirits. Now, we get to know that his means see witchcraft. Spirits haunted by spirits means haunted by witchcraft. Any like which okay, so she was convinced that the room was haunted by spirits and that the stranger had somehow caused them these to enter into her furniture. Now Mrs. Hall was very panicked. The feeling among the neighbors was that the trouble was caused by witchcraft. But witchcraft or not, when news of the burglary at the clergyman's home became known, the strange scientist was strongly suspected of having a hand in it. Suspicion grew ever stronger when he suddenly produced some ready cash, though he had admitted that not long before he had no money. The village constable was secretly sent for. Means the village constable was told or was asked to um, arrest the burglar. Now, Mrs. Hall went to the scientist who had somehow mysteriously appeared from his empty bedroom. I want to know what you have done doing to my chair, what you have been doing to my chair upstairs, she demanded. And I want to know how it is you came out of an empty room and how you entered a locked room. The scientist was always quick tempered. The scientist was always quick tempered. Now he became furious. You don't understand who or what I am, he shouted. Very well, I will show you. Suddenly he threw off bandages, whiskers, spectacles, and even nose. It took him only a minute to do this. The horrified people in the bar found themselves staring at a headless man. A man without a head. Mrs. Jeffers, the constable, now arrived and was quite surprised to find that he had to arrest a man without a head. But Jeffers was not easily prevented from doing his duty. He was a hard-working constable, you can say. If a magistrate's warrant ordered a person's arrest, then the person had to be arrested with or without a head. Now, there followed a remarkable scene as the policeman tried to get hold of a man who was becoming more and more invisible as he threw off one garment after another. Finally, a shirt flew in the air, and the constable found himself struggling with someone he could not see at all. Some people tried to help him, means some people, the local people of inn tried to help Jeffers, the constable, but found themselves hit by blows that seemed to come from nowhere. Means that Griffin was hitting the people. In the end, Jeffers was knocked unconscious as he made a last attempt to hold on to the unseen scientist. There were nervous, excited cries of hold him!" But this was easier said than done. Griffin had shaken himself free, and no one knew where to lay hands on him. Means he is not arrested. Okay, now these are the question answers, and the novel is The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells. This chapter was a little part of that novel. So, hope you understood the chapter. It was really a mysterious and interesting chapter. Thank you.